Hello there, and welcome to the Geeky Brummie Year 8 Issue 4 episode. Joining me today is Jedi Master Sam David Edwards.
Hello.
Jedi Master Keith Bloomfield.
Hello there.
Jedi Master Lee Price.
I'm more of like a Han Solo type.
And I'm Jedi Knight, Mr. Ryan Parrish. How have we all been? All good?
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, making the best of the 4 days of English summer
Yes.
as we record before the
So
deluge.
Picked the most beautiful sunny day in the world to come into our bunker and record an episode. Mainly because there's air conditioning, I think.
Yes.
But coming up today, we'll be talking about what the hell is going on at Xbox and in the gaming industry in general.
Yeah.
We've got some geeky anniversaries this year, including Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers, and Star Wars Episode 1. It's a big birthday. We'll be talking about Geeky Going On and what's coming up in the local area, and our One Geek Things, but we shall be back after this. Over the last week, Xbox has decided to shutter a few studios, including Tango Gameworks, who released the amazing Hi-Fi Rush last year, which was one of Lee's games of the year, if you keep an eye on the Geeky Brummie website. Arcane Austin, who released Redfall, and Alpha Dog Game Studios' Mighty Doom, with Roundhouse Studios now being absorbed into the Elder Scrolls Online team. So I think these are all Bethesda studios,
Yes.
was that right? So Microsoft bought Bethesda about a year and a half ago now.
It's been a while, yeah.
And yeah, so Microsoft are just buying every gaming studio under the sun, and now they realised, oops, we've got too many game studios. So they just seem to be pruning away without actually working out what each studio does from the press reaction. Lee, do you want to go into a bit more detail?
Okay, so basically the situation as we sort of know it right now. So basically, like you said, the 4 studios got closed down. So we got 2 of them especially have been getting like a lot of sort of negative attention because of how many like acclaimed titles those studios have put out. So obviously you mentioned Redfall for Arcane Austin, which obviously wasn't well received, but before that they made Prey, which was incredibly well received.
Yeah.
They also worked on the first Dishonored with their sister studio in Leon. The Dishonored 2 was done by the Leon studio exclusively, so and
They've survived the cold.
yeah. I think part of that is because they're French, and if they get closed down, then Paris is on fire again.
It's very expensive to get rid of French stuff, I think Microsoft have learned.
So as a result, I think, you've got that, and obviously like Tango, as well as Hi-Fi Rush, they obviously made The Evil Within and Ghostwire Tokyo, and there's a lot of discussion about why they chose these studios. So one thing that's kind of interesting about sort of looking at the answers that have come out of Microsoft in the days since is there is no real coherent answer. And the more that we get out of Microsoft, the more obvious it becomes that they don't actually have any idea what they're doing. Let me direct you to a quote that...
Is it the Microsoft Games president?
So it was the head of the Xbox Game Studio. So so it's Matt Booty, who is like the head of the thing, which is the funniest name in games development.
Is that even better than Bowser being in charge of Nintendo?
I mean, that is pretty funny as well. But
Bowser is great.
But it's not Booty though, is it? So, but basically, what was it he said? We need smaller games that give us prestige and awards. And he said
But they just won an award with Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah. And this is the thing, like it was literally the day after they closed Tango. He said this in a sort of earnings call, sort of thing. And it's like everyone's response to that is, but you just closed a studio that gave you a smaller game that gave you prestige and awards. And it's just baffling. And then we had Sarah Bond, who is like one of the many other executives. I don't actually know what her specific role is. I think she might be sort of in charge of marketing and stuff. And she was asked like point blank, why did you close Tango? She gave like the most generic corporate response. I can't even remember the exact words because it's honestly, none of it means anything. It's basically like, oh, well, we love games and every studio's got its own requirements and we, yeah. And it's basically that, and it's like, okay, well, that didn't actually answer the question, but okay. But I love that in that clip, the cameraman decides, let's cut to the graph that's sitting above her, which shows Xbox profits year on year. And in 2020, the graph shoots up. But in like the last year, it's gone from here to like slightly lower. And that is why we have to close studios.
So what happened in 2020 which made people stay at home for quite a lot of time and maybe invest more in video games? Wonder what that could possibly have been that happened in 2020. Any ideas?
Donald Trump elected, no one wanted to go out and face the world.
From a business point of view, though, I don't understand why you would just shutter studios for no reason. If you're not hemorrhaging money, I mean, there's bigger businesses out there that are hemorrhaging money all the time but don't shutter things. And like you said, to go the day after and literally contradict what you've done in your actions, that makes no sense, because it's why just shut them? It doesn't. Are you folding those teams into other teams so that they can continue development? Because the other thing is that I don't understand is what those studios must have been working on stuff.
Well, that's the thing. This is the thing. They weren't actually working on stuff actively.
Redfall, they were trying to kind of rescue it, I believe. Arcane had
they
a
were
load
doing
of
a lot
content.
of like post-launch content, and I think they were working on the DLC 5 hours before they were closed.
Yeah.
And then, but Hi-Fi Tango, they were pitching Hi-Fi Rush 2. So they were still very much in the sort of pre-production pitching stage.
And they'd also just released Hi-Fi Rush to a wider audience as well, because it became available
on
those
PlayStation.
platforms. So it's like, surely that's just to increase the demand, because other people get to see how good a game that actually is.
But the thing with what it is their argument was, because Matt Booty didn't just say that, he didn't just contradict himself, he did kind of explain a little bit, which was basically that Microsoft felt that they had to close something for the simple fact that their management team is currently spread too thin across all the studios they have. To which my response is, well, that's a management problem, because you didn't have to buy all those studios. Or if you were going to buy all those studios, why didn't you bring some other people onto the management team to help manage the studios?
Some of the managers from said studios would have been
But also,
useful.
that's the thing. What's fascinating about the Bethesda studios being closed down is they kept all of Bethesda's management. So surely they were the ones in charge of Bethesda's studios anyway.
To me, it seems to be that Microsoft have bet the entire farm on Game Pass.
Yes.
So Game Pass is their idea of turn games into Netflix, monthly subscription fee, never buy a physical copy again, never buy a disc. You just get whatever comes out on Game Pass, and then we'll have a stock stable of Microsoft Game Studios titles, and then we'll bring stuff in and take stuff up and refresh it from third-party studios. But what their plan was, well, instead of just buying stuff for third-party studios, we'll just buy the studio and get them to make stuff for Game Pass. And the problem is, people are getting sick of subscription services. Yeah,
and I think there's two factors to it. Like you said, people are sick of streaming platforms. So I saw someone try and make the argument of like, oh, well, there's not that many like streaming platforms, like there's not many subscriptions in gaming right now, because obviously like each of the consoles has one, but like, that's it's not
like Valve just sell whatever they want, and we'll come on to Helldivers 2 as well. I want to talk about that.
It's not like film and TV where it's like every studio's now decided we want our own streaming service. But I think anyone making that argument is forgetting that people who play games don't just play games. They are also subscribed to Netflix. They are also subscribed to Disney Plus, and it's all this sort of thing that, because you've got all these other streaming services coming in I think, and you've got the cost of living crisis as well. People are cutting back on things, and subscription services are one of the first things people are cutting back on.
Yeah, and the thing with Game Pass, when it launched it, they threw a lot of money at it. They absolute a lot of money out of it, and it was a kind of, you'd get probably a AAA title every month without fail. And now, as you said, I think we've said this multiple times, they bought all these studios. 90% of them haven't released a project in the last 12 to 18 months. Yeah, well, so they've got all these studios hemorrhaging money, paying for this development time, and still nothing to show for it in the vast
and
majority
this
of
is a
time.
persistent problem that Microsoft have had probably since the Xbox One days, where they've kind of just forgotten to release games. Like Microsoft, I've noticed over the last few years, have this brilliant habit of just announcing games and then never releasing any game. I still remember the State of Decay 3 was announced in, 2018 or something like that, and they've said literally nothing else about it since. It's not a game that I'm particularly interested in.
Sounds like they're announcing Star Wars movies.
Yeah, but if you think about big Xbox games over the last 12 to 18 months, Halo Infinite,
Which obviously hasn't been massively
which is a
well
live service game, which is awful.
You had Starfield,
which
is also kind of disappointing. This is what's sort of fascinating about like Closing Tango, is that Hi-Fi Rush was kind of like exactly what Xbox needed.
it's a single player game.
Not just that, but it was also a game that had people talking. It had a lot of excitement around it, a lot of buzz.
But the problem is, it's a single player game, and people play it, complete it, and then they're happy, they're done, they've moved on. Now it's executives look for, how do you turn it into a constant stream of revenue? How do you make sure there's DLC on it? It's how do you ensure there's microtransactions? They're trying to turn it into mobile gaming, which was about mobile gaming 5 to 10 years ago.
Which is why that graph in that video was the perfect illustration, because the problem is capitalism, as always, where it's like, because Microsoft is a publicly traded company, their objective isn't to sell us stuff or to make the best tech or whatever it is. Their goal is to appease shareholders. And if that number isn't going, if that line isn't constantly going up every quarter, then something needs to be done about it. And that means studios get closed down.
And if you think about the 2 studios they have, well, the 3 studios they've closed, they probably, Tango Gameworks, they're not actively developing anything. To them, it's just sunk cost people sat around, even though they're probably working on their pre-development stage. To an executive, that's, well, they're not producing anything, get them gone. And then you look at Arcane with Redfall, and it's like, well, that game sucked, nobody liked it, why are you still working on it? Get rid of it.
They claim wasn't the reason.
But it's obviously the reason.
But I think part of it is that also they weren't making a new game at that point. But it's like they were also pitching a new game, and they were looking to pitch another Prey, basically. Not necessarily another game in the series, but like something similar, another sort of immersive sim in the vein of Prey or Dishonored.
Well, it seems you're getting hammered for innovation now. It's unless you make a cookie cutter AAA title in the zone of a Ubisoft, here's a million things to do on the map, or it's a live service of, there'll be season passes and there's constant content in the form of Destiny or Fortnite or something like that.
But isn't the audience going to grow tired of all of these at some point? Because if the idea is to keep the line going up, it's like, without innovation, how surely at some point people will just plateau and it'll just be
there's already a shift in this happening, like very visibly. Like we're seeing console sales like stagnating. Well, 2 consoles are seeing their sales stagnating.
How old are the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5
about
now?
5 years now.
4 years now.
4 years, but
4 years as of the end of this year, basically.
now we seem to have gone from like a very short 4 to 5 year cycle to 8 to 9 years. Consoles are now expected to last.
And this is
the other problem.
This is what's fascinating about the current console generation is it's very hard to pinpoint like games that sort of define this generation, because there's so few games that have been released since the start of it, and the problem is it's all these budgets have accelerated upwards and games are taking longer to make, and like this is why you need projects like Hi-Fi Rush, smaller things that can be inserted in between the big blockbuster things. And the
perfect example, GTA 6, the gap between GTA 5 and GTA 6's launch is longer than the gap between GTA 1 being released and GTA 5. And how many games came out in that period of time? You had 1, 2, 3, San Andreas, Vice City, all the Game Boy Advance games.
Yeah, there was a bunch of side things.
Chinatown Wars, stuff like that. And all of that was made in the same amount of time. It's made from 5 to 6 because GTA Online.
My favourite summary of that situation is the PS2 had 3 GTAs. GTA 5 has had 3 PlayStations.
But is that again another indication of how the gaming industry works now? That because they released that trailer for GTA 6, which I just was like, meh. But it got a lot of people I know like thinking, oh my God, this is going to be the greatest game ever. And I was like, but...
And 2.5 years down the line, still nothing
really?
new.
Is it going to be the greatest game you've ever played? It's going to be just more of the same with perhaps a few graphical tweaks. It's like, where's the really interesting developments? And it's interesting you were saying about mobile. Like, is the gaming industry thinking that's where it's got to throw all of its energies into? Because I think you have the buzz of, like, PlayStation have tried their PlayStation Portal thing, and Xbox, there's rumours of them thinking about mobile stuff. So is the gaming industry thinking, we're going to get rid of the under-telly device and move towards, because of the success of things like Steam Deck and Razors and all the rest of them, is the industry shifting to that kind of like
I don't
mobile, you know,
I think
we're going backwards rather than forwards?
So what I find interesting about that is, like, right now, the most successful consoles on the market are arguably handhelds. If you look at the Switch and you look at the Steam Deck, they are both doing very well. And I think there is like a clear like appetite for having that sort of hybrid console where you can play it portably, and obviously
most of the PC manufacturers are jumping on. So there's the ROG Ally, Legion, there's the Legion Go, Neo, and
but I think that like Sony and Microsoft are a bit reluctant to jump right into it because they've convinced themselves so thoroughly that the thing that sells consoles is power.
Yeah,
they've convinced themselves
exclusives as well.
Which again is, you think that's just insanity because they've got a market waiting, and I know you're very keen on the idea of legacy and archiving of games, and the fact that I downloaded the Delta app to play retro games on my phone. I mean, I've got other consoles that I can do it with it, but the convenience of having several things in different bags and you've always got it. But I'd quite happily give, you know, Sony, whatever, a few pennies to be able to play older games at my convenience.
So you
Because
say
the AAA
that.
games, newer games, I haven't really got the time to.
So you
put
say
into
that, and then you look at what's happened in the mobile market, specifically Square Enix and stuff like Knights of the Old Republic, which were released at £10 to £15 on a mobile download. These are like 15, 20-year-old games, and it's just an excuse for them to sell them at a premium price again.
It's funny you mentioned Square Enix in the mobile space, though, because like that's an interesting whole thing. Because the Square Enix went really hard on the mobile market because, well, you know, if you do well in it, you make a lot of money.
Yeah,
they've launched probably about like 50 million games in the space of about 2 years, and they've shuttered about 40 million games in the last 2 years.
but they were releasing like Final Fantasy 4, 5, 6, the old like SNES, NES era games, but still trying to charge £10 to £12.
Where you would expect, if you were saying $1.99, something like that, then you'd go, that's fair enough.
Instant purchase because it's a great game. But then you look at mobile game now versus where it was. So you had stuff, really innovative game dev story when that first came out, all the Kairosoft games, and they were £2 to £3, and you'd get a good few hours worth of play out of it. Motorsport Manager was one of the first big games I picked up on. I think it was a Sega release now, but that was an indie title that got bought out by Sega. So yeah, now you look at mobile games, you look at Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, which is a collect 'em up, but it's a constant money. It's pay to win.
That is basically what the mobile market overall is.
Yeah.
It's basically just free to play games where they expect you to pump loads of money into it over time.
I mean, I know it's unlikely, highly unlikely, but as a very personally, do you think that the games industry is heading towards that kind of like Atari-style crash where it's going to
It's funny
it's
you
going to
say
collapse
this,
so much?
because I have a video in development right now for my YouTube channel about this very question. So wait and see.
We'll save it for that.
But what I will say is that right now, what like Sony and Microsoft really need to be doing is looking at Nintendo and going, what are they doing that we're not?
Yeah.
Because Nintendo, even though like Switch sales are down from last year, but when I say they're down, I mean like they've gone from 17 million sold in a year to 15 million sold in a year.
And they've just announced the Switch 2.
And that's why they've announced the Switch 2.
And the likelihood is the only reason somebody's buying a Switch now is because their old one's bust.
Yeah.
They've had it for so
Or
long.
they want the OLED model, so it's slightly better.
And you know we've gotten to, but the point is that they've still made a profit despite the Switch sales going down because they've got a strong software lineup, and just because they
never reduced the price of their thing.
there is that too. But,
How much is Mario Kart still trading for?
but also the thing about Mario Kart is that that's still the best-selling Switch game, and that sold like another like 10 million copies in the last year as well. I've looked at their financials recently, so it's like, and that's the whole thing though. Like, Nintendo is succeeding because they're doing what Microsoft and Sony seem unwilling to do, which is investing in their studios and letting them grow.
And they're staying in their lane of not as powerful but innovative, and will do different things every time.
But does Nintendo gain because of the issues they had? They came off the Wii U, which was a massive successful console, and then slightly didn't go quite as well with the Wii U.
I think that was more of a marketing failure more than anything else.
Yeah, bear in mind that when the Wii U came out, they showed loads of pictures of the tablet controller and not the console itself. So a lot of people, especially with its name, thought it was an accessory for the Wii.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I don't need a tablet controller for the Wii, and just carried on with their life. But this is the thing, like, Microsoft could have just gone, okay, let's invest money into Tango Gameworks. We've had all this critical acclaim. How can we capitalize on that and make like their next project even bigger? How can we market that better? How can we get it moving?
Especially if it hadn't have necessarily been Hi-Fi Rush 2. I would have been much more in favour of do something new and innovative rather than just
But I think this
sequels.
is the thing. When you look at Nintendo, they have a tendency to invest in their studios, and even if a game doesn't do incredibly well, they're still willing to like keep it going and do so. Because someone brought up the Kirby series as a really good comparison, where for 30 years, Kirby sells 1 to 2 million copies per game consistently.
But Kirby's not a Nintendo character though, it's HAL, isn't it?
It is. It's owned by Nintendo. The IP is owned by Nintendo. But like the fact that Nintendo have greenlit, have allowed HAL to keep making those games year on year when they don't grow in sales. The only one that's sort of seen any sort of growth is the most recent one, which is Forgotten Land, which I think went up to like 5 million copies or something.
Well, you have other stuff like the Yoshi Yarn Tale one, whatever that was really fun, really innovative.
And because they've invested all this money into all their different studios and they've got all these different projects going on that aren't necessarily all the big like Tears of the Kingdom style releases, they've got a lineup that's like the Switch since it released has had like a first party title release for it like every month and a half on average. Whereas like again, Sony and Microsoft, it's like I can point to last year, Sony had Spider-Man 2. The year before that, Xbox had nothing. And I'm like, what is going on? Like
well, they'd had a Call of Duty and FIFA, which is where they make the money. That's all people care about.
They hadn't bought Activision yet though.
Yeah. But can we just, I know we need to wrap up because we're probably going too long into this topic, but Helldivers 2, can we talk about that whole situation? Because that is executive meddling at the highest level, which is somebody probably went, we need to get PlayStation Network numbers up this month. Let's put a mandatory requirement where this service is not offered in 170 countries around the world. And in some of the countries where it's offered, you need to have a PlayStation 5 or a PlayStation 4 to log on to the PlayStation Network anyway. Let's put it on the hottest game, the most viral game that we have just bought.
So what's interesting about like the Helldivers 2 situation, and I can actually like relate it to the Tango situation, is that both Sony and Microsoft have done something there where there's an obvious growth opportunity that they've just gone, what if we just threw this in the toilet? So Helldivers 2, as you pointed out, PSN not available in 170 countries. Sony recently have been complaining about a lack of growth within the console market, and I'm just like, how about you open up the PlayStation to those 170 countries? That feels like a really obvious growth opportunity for you.
And then you could do your whole, we'll stick it on Steam, but you can still have to log in with your PlayStation Network.
And like people would complain less because they wouldn't be locked out of it, because they've now done the same thing with Ghost of Tsushima for PC, where like that's not going to be sold in 170 countries.
I think Valve have pretty much said, if it's PSN, we're not going to sell it.
And like we it's the same thing as Tango, where Microsoft have been complaining about we're not doing well in Japan, so let's close our one Japanese studio. Whereas instead of leveraging it and using it as a gateway into the Japanese market,
Business. So,
Yeah.
you know.
but all these executives, they're all big brain business boys, and we don't understand their machinations. Because
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote that I've seen a lot recently that I do like, which is, if all the best people are in all the best jobs, why is everything a bin fire?
I think we need to close this on gaming is just bad at the moment.
I think, well, I would disagree with
apart
that.
from the indie ski.
I think gaming is great.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Business
of great
is
games.
bad.
You know, this past week, as of recording, has had like some just superb indie games just across the board.
Yeah.
And I think we need to sort of celebrate that.
Your latest games of the week's selections have been like, you know, most of those are not AAA titles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only big sort of AAA thing I've made game of the week recently was Stella Played.
Yeah.
So, and that's like, even that's kind of outside of what you'd expect.
Yeah.
That's had a lot of chat, but that's
That's
for all
not
the time.
For separate reasons.
But yeah, I think like ultimately the conclusion we can reach from all this is it's actually capitalism that's bad.
Yes.
And basically, stock market is ruining everything.
So our advice is go and look at indie games. Go and buy some indie games. Support some creators who are maybe able to make their own AAA title in the future and get away from the big bad of being owned by a massive corporation who doesn't know what to do with them.
I agree.
Geek of the Week.
My name's Nick. I'm the assistant manager at Worlds Apart in Birmingham. One of the oldest comic shops in the UK. We're part of Forbidden Planet International, so we've got stores up in Scotland running all the way down to Brighton. And we are I guess a nerd specialist shop. So, you know, comics, manga, graphic novels, Funko, everything that you can think of really that's collectible or fun or enjoyable, we've got it. I would probably say catching just a random episode of the Batman animated series when I was a kid. It was that really, really grabbed me and sucked me into that whole universe, and then, you know, the Superman and the Justice League cartoons as well. Probably the original Transformers, actually, because it's got such a big legacy and everybody really, really raves on about how great it is, and it just passed me by. I never saw it as a kid, so I don't really have that attachment to Transformers, but I don't know. I kind of wish maybe that I did sometimes. It's going to be anime and manga, very specifically those two. I have a very broad range of interests, but it's those two that I come back. We get posed this question on a daily basis, and it's always really, really dependent on who you're speaking to. If you've got someone that's coming into anime and manga as someone that really enjoyed the Marvel movies, then I might say give One Punch Man a try or My Hero a try. If someone's coming in with a bit more of a drama and sort of rom-com background, then, you know, there's rom-coms and stuff like that available there. One that I started fairly recently is a series called Ice Guy and the Cool Girl. This one here. So it's a very like adult romance, and not adult in the sense of the content, but in the sense of it's an adult cast, which is pretty unusual these days for anime and manga. And it's based in a workplace, so they're balancing romance and hobbies and, you know, having to deal with the grind of work, but also with a supernatural twist, which is kind of fun. Call of Duty, probably. The most recent version of Modern Warfare 1. Yeah. Favorite snack? probably those salt and vinegar kettle chips. Really good. I'm more of a savoury snacker than a sweet snack. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, just under Worlds Apart Birmingham. If you go to forbiddenplanet.co.uk, they've got a whole bit on there about our stores, and there's a newsletter that you can sign up to where we actually get a really, really cool feature for our back issue comics quite frequently, where we'll highlight some cool issues or some key issues, or if we've just bought a new collection of back issues, they'll go in there as well. So that's always a good place to keep up. And then we have our own Discord server as well, which is very anime and manga focused. The Discord server was a fun little thing that we started during the first lockdown. We wanted a way of keeping in touch with some of our regulars that don't use the main social media platforms. And that just seemed like a really fun way to do that. And it's kind of evolved over time into this absolute behemoth of a server with hundreds and hundreds of people that, you know, play games, and we have all sorts of channels for various chats. People can talk about all of the latest manga chapters and anime that's coming out. We talk about video games. It's grown beyond my wildest expectations. Not too much at the moment. But there may be an Instagram coming soon for Warhammer Minis.
Awesome.
Ooh. I mean, I play Space Marines, which is, I guess, kind of vanilla and basic in some people's eyes. But again, I think it all depends. Some people like the crazy, scary monsters and go for something like Tyranids, or are just absolutely unhinged and go for orcs. So, you know, it all depends on the person. Yeah.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
A lot of birthdays coming up this year.
I've already had mine.
A lot of birthdays every year.
Yeah.
It's kind of what they do.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
A lot of special birthdays
When's your
coming up.
birthday?
My birthday's
25th of February. What year? Every year. Yeah, there we go.
Yes, but there are some anniversaries coming up, or Anakin anniversaries, as Keith said earlier. So I think most of us, apart from maybe Lee, went to watch Star Wars Episode 1. It's its 25th anniversary year, when George Lucas inflicted Jar Jar Binks onto humanity. The world has never been the same since. So 1999 it came out. I remember watching it because I was on holiday in the Isle of Man, and I went to the local cinema in the Isle of Man to watch it. So it was a very weird one because it wasn't my usual cinema. But I don't know. I actually enjoyed it a lot more than probably I did the first time I watched Star Wars Episode 1.
I did, yeah. I think it does have a lot going for it. It does have, yes, Jar Jar and all the other things that people didn't like about it to start with.
Trade negotiations.
Yeah.
Casual accent racism to a certain level.
Yes. So some of the most spectacularly irritating child acting ever recorded to film. But there are lots of great bits too. I still think Duel of the Fates is one of my favourite bits of music in any film ever. Mm-hmm. Darth Maul is just cool, even despite having seen the video where someone sort of edited his combat together to look like a really camp dance. It's still very cool.
I love that. It's Peter Serafinowicz doing the voice as well.
Yeah,
The guy from Look Around You.
I was expecting you to say this, like he was him using his real voice, sort of like when you have those Darth Vader clips where he's talking normally. Because Peter Serafinowicz.
But, somebody now needs to edit the Look Around You voice onto Darth Maul.
Well, I sort of remember off the back of that is the fact that he did, because obviously he was in Spaced as well. Like he did the exact line in Spaced, because obviously he played like Simon Pegg's character's like rival and everything. So they just had him like do that. At last, I will have my revenge again. And it was like him sort of finding their keys in a bar and saying,
which I love because I think it was about 2 or 3 scenes earlier. Is Simon Pegg's rant about the awfulness of episode 1 in the comic books.
He did it across the whole season. He just that was like Tim's character for that entire second season was I hate the Phantom Menace.
Well, I think in context now, looking back, I think the rose tinting is starting to work quite a bit. I mean, every single line in that film has probably been memed to death by now, and it has become part of culture to a certain extent. But if you think about Attack of the Clones is probably the worst one out of the 3 as well, personally. Might be a controversial opinion. Revenge of the Sith is much better, and it kind of finishes that triple on the high. But then you think about all the stuff that's been added into the Disneyverse since then. So we've had the Clone Wars, we've had the second Clone Wars series. You've had bad. There's only been 2 because you had the Gennady Tartakovsky Clone Wars, which is amazing and really need to watch. Then you have the George Lucas Clone Wars film/series. Then it moves into the Bad Batch. Then you got Rebels, and it's really expanded out that time. And this is our kick-off point, really. And I think having all that extra information and having all that detail involved about how the Separatists come about and how that schism happens and how the Republic is starting to collapse in on itself because it's too old, it's too weighty, there's too much bureaucracy, no decision-making, makes it a much better film in context now when you watch it back.
Yeah, it almost feels like the film is a spin-off of the TV shows in some ways. Like you sort of... I was watching it thinking, oh, it's Plo Koon. He's great, I like him. He hasn't got a single line in this film, but he was really cool. I agree. I think Ahsoka as well, there's been a lot of stuff that does build on the mythology and, to say, the sort of background characters. And it does make you see it in a different light. And I think as well the fact that the sequel trilogy has not gone down very well either.
See, that's what I'm wondering if people have, like, looking back on the prequel trilogy because of how bad the sequel trilogy was.
So it had a cohesive plot across 3 films, which is a good point to start off for any trilogy.
Well, I think that's one of the big benefits of this trilogy is that it is George Lucas. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's what he wanted to do. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because it's 16 years since Return of the Jedi had finished, and we'd had tons of novelizations and comics in the intervening time. And this was George trying to kind of like go, right, this is the story I want to tell. And he tells the story he wanted to tell. And I don't mind the trade negotiation things because I think that readied me for what the last 13 odd years has done.
Setting, I think, and I think people forget that was just that's just an excuse for how we can get to the Emperor.
But I do like the overall message, and we do get to points later in the second and third film that if you hadn't had this first one and the kind of like this insidious build, the whole idea of like, you know, oh let's say Chancellor Valorum's not very good, and let's have a vote of no confidence. Wherever we heard that recently, you know, that whole idea of the political machinations of like really evil people messing up billions of people's lives because they just want to.
And that's the other thing that it turns it on its head from the original trilogy of the Jedi weren't good guys. You can see they've got their own machinations, their own kind of dealing with power in it. And there's a whole thing, and it's hidden all the way through the trilogy of basically they are losing their connection to the Force, and it's mentioned multiple times, and they're getting weaker and weaker, and it's kind of, as the Clone Wars accelerates and goes on and on and on, they're more and more swerving away from what the point of the Jedi is.
But I do also like the fact that it is, without question, a kid's film.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of is great in a way that it is in much the same way, like, grown-ups now freak out if this film isn't for me. It's fine. It's a kid's film. It's all good. It's very much geared towards a kid. They don't say the film isn't
for me. If they did that, that wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah,
they demand the head of Kathleen Kennedy.
I mean, it did give us the greatest ever breakdown of anything on YouTube, which is Red Letter Media's Mr. Plinkett's Star Wars Episode 1 review, which is fantastic to watch now. But you do watch it and you go, imagine what the Disney films would be like if you go and watch this.
But again, I thought this as well. Phantom Menace. just reminded me of where George Lucas's iconography for this kind of film comes from, because, it's quite clear he's a fan of the old Flash Gordon serials, the old Buck Rogers serials, the Rocketman serials, because you have the view screens on the trade delegation ships that are very much like straight out of Flash Gordon.
And then the beautiful Art Deco and
the whole look and the styling. And even something like the pod racing sequence, which goes on for it takes up a big chunk of this movie, and it really doesn't serve any great purpose to the whole film.
It led to Star Wars Episode 1 Racer on the N64.
one of the greatest arcade games as well of all time.
But that whole sequence now, we are 25 years later, that whole pod racing sequence is spectacular. It's a great piece of action cinema.
And obviously, like when you to kind of connect that to a bit to you saying about Attack of the Clones being like the worst of them, it does make me realise how many memes come from both the first and the third film. Because like as soon as you said about pod racing, I just heard, now that's pod racing.
There's the I shall watch your career with great interest line, which is used all over the time. Something like, now there's two of them. The situation's getting worse now. There's two of them. All those kind of lines. It's clunky dialogue, but it's there to serve a purpose. I think, which is just to join the scenes.
I think the only meme I can think from the second one is probably the sand line, and that's it. Because at least like the third one's got the hello there and the.
There's the women and the children too. Don't forget.
Yeah. And and the higher ground.
Yes.
One is obviously the other big one I've seen from the third one, but yeah.
But again, you look back at the cast as well. So you got Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, Samuel L. Jackson, Brian Blessed.
I forgot that Brian Blessed was the
Boss Nass.
But it's a fantastic cast as well. And the other thing I'm going to really say is the sound design is still absolutely fantastic. The sound of those pod races make you feel like you are in that race. When you hear that engine coming up, it sounds so good.
Well, I love it as well, the fact that for the most of that sequence, there's no music. It's all down to the sounds that you think. And then as you get to the end of it, then that kind of the John Williams score comes back in. It's a remarkable bit of cinema.
Every single pod racer has its own unique sound, but it all sounds realistic at the same time. You can all imagine them being actual
that's
things.
the genius of Ben Burtt, because he's, that's Star Wars. I think if Star Wars hadn't been John Williams and Ben Burtt doing the sounds, it wouldn't be what it is. There's something about the noise of a TIE fighter or an X-Wing or a pod racer or a lightsaber ignition or a blaster fire or whatever it is. All of those sounds are what makes it come alive.
Yeah, and as you said, Sam, John Williams was having a very good day when he wrote the score for Star Wars Episode 1.
Yeah.
Duel of Fates it's instantly recognisable from that first bar.
Yeah. The other thing, which is what my partner Madeline said, was whenever she hears the bars of the 20th Century Fox fanfare, she says if Star Wars music doesn't come after that, it's not right.
Yeah.
And that was one of the beauties of seeing that
having that old
modern
music,
Star Wars not having the 20th Century Fox fanfare before it, and then you have that blast of John Williams. That was like, I looked that first few seconds in the cinema, you kind of went, yeah, this is good.
Yeah. And I think it had such a backlash at the time because it was so different from the original trilogy. So you've got to think about how much practical effects you had in the first three films, and then you're moving to 90% CGI in here. There's still a lot of models and still a lot of practical effects underneath, but it was a complete culture change of shift of how you did special effects in a movie. I mean, you look back now, some of the CGI has dated a hell of a lot, especially like when it had the big battles on the planes and it's just one green field where somebody has just gone click fill on the paint on a model. Yeah. But it still doesn't matter to me. It's still effective.
Yeah. I think it set the tone for the next 25 years of filmmaking. Mm-hmm. And what it does that a lot of films don't do now was entertain. And so I can forgive shonky dialogue and not top-notch special effects. But it's 25 years ago, so I don't expect it. I mean,
you don't
Shrek looked terrible when it came out. So
you don't go back now and watch film and just say, "Oh, that looks bad." It's like some stuff does hold.
I mean, you can't go back and look at the original King Kong. Or the original Godzilla, and be like, oh, what a terrible film!
Some
that
man
looks
in a
awful.
rubber suit.
That's not what you're there for. It's like it's from its time, but it's the story and the message and what. And I love Star Wars, so you know,
More Star Wars, isn't it?
having not had any for 16 years, I was quite happy. I really didn't get the whole backlash thing. It was like, you know.
But that's the other thing as well, is looking back 25 years ago versus now, we get a constant drip feed of Star Wars content.
Yeah.
So we had Tales of the Sith drop last week, Bad Batch has just finished, there's this Mandalorian, Boba Fett. None of this existed at that time. It was, you had the 3 films, the holiday special, and then something else was being added in at this point. And I imagine it was a cultural moment.
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking, is like, I wonder if like a lot of the backlash was down to that gap of time, and it sort of allowed people to kind of build up all these ideas in their head about what it could be, and then it comes out and it doesn't match those expectations.
Well, you'd have the build-up as well with 97, 98, 99 with the Star Wars remastered editions with all the extra CGI being put in there. So it was kind of that fervour had been bubbling for 3 years. People were like, oh, Star Wars is back, we're getting something new.
Yes, because I think, you've obviously got that gap of time where you haven't got it, but then obviously you would have had that, and obviously I think, wouldn't they have announced that it was in production around that sort of time? So you've got those couple of years of people being like, oh man, what's it going to be like? Yeah. And I think, you know, especially because you're going to get people who would have seen it the first time around, who would have been kids when they would have seen it, and now it's kind of like defined their childhood, and it's like this nostalgia thing, and we're getting it back now, and I think a lot of that is sort of a big build-up to it, and unlike now, where a lot of the backlash to the Star Wars stuff is because there's so much of it, it's all basically just being rushed out.
Well, if you think Star Wars is the original trilogy is Gen X, then prequel trilogy is pretty much millennials, and then the new trilogy is going to be Gen Z, and maybe in 20 years' time people are going to look back at the Disney films a little bit nicer. I personally won't, but...
My biggest takeaway was I was a little disappointed that it was the kind of remastered versions, because I was really hoping I'd get Puppet Yoda. Yeah. And I didn't get Puppet Yoda. So it wasn't the same film I saw 25 years ago, which was a little disappointing. If I'd have seen it in the same cinema, which I could have done, but they had it in a different screen, and I was like, no, it's not the same. But I would have liked to have.
For me, it was my first cinema experience of Star Wars, and I think that's the difference as well, because that was they didn't appear every year on rotation. It was just a case of Star Wars is back in the screen, and we got the remastered one. So that was my first cinema experience of Star Wars, rather than my nan's VHS copy, which has been recorded off ITV with a Bovril advert 30 minutes in.
I hope they do a anniversary edition of the next 2 as well, because they tried it with Phantom Menace a couple of years back, where they did a 3D release.
Yeah, it didn't go down.
But I didn't bother with that because I wasn't sure that was any good. But I hope they do.
I think there's been enough for this
25s of the next one.
I mean, I think the screenings we went to were pretty well attended. Yeah. And from the other screenings I've heard, it seems to be quite popular.
Yeah. Well, it's pushed it back up in the box office charts, I think, in terms of the overall box office. So that's pretty good.
It would be interesting to see if they do like anniversaries for the sequel trilogy.
Don't think that's gonna...
We got 25 years to wait for that.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's like I'm thinking first of all like the 10-year anniversary.
Probably more like 15 now for the first one. It's been out a while. Force Awakens. When was that out?
I don't think it's been. It might maybe 10 years almost. We might be coming up on it.
Yeah, 2015. So that's 10 years next year.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's not good.
So yeah, like I imagine next year they go like, oh, let's do a Force Awakens 10th anniversary, and then no one goes.
I mean, to be fair, Force Awakens was the best of the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, because it was just a No Hope.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And No Hope was perfectly. That's probably the perfect description of it.
Just don't think too hard about the science of Starkiller. Like, how does that work?
We got a moon. We put a big laser in it.
Yeah, it eats the sun. No.
Right, we've got another couple of anniversaries to talk about as well. 2 40th anniversaries this year. So the first one being, let's go with Transformers, the first one. So first, it's still going today. It's probably on its 20th, 30th different iteration of what it is, but G1 Transformers 1984 came out. Were you a fan, Keith? Nope.
I was a little bit perhaps above the target age range for it, but I was kind of into that. I liked, because I was a big into Japanese robots and kind of stuff like this. So as it was a kind of hybrid of Japanese toys and stuff that was more readily available, because it was you couldn't get that kind of stuff back in the early 80s. It was practically impossible unless you were Jonathan Ross. So it was kind of cool to be able to have that kind of stuff in the UK, and it was kind of like they looked cool. I mean, you know, what can be better than a massive truck turning into a robot? It's, you know, it's quite cool. So I kind of like the iconography and the stuff, and I kind of was not a big buyer of the Marvel comics, but you know, some of the Marvel UK stuff was quite interesting because it was doing stuff that wasn't quite, you know, the American stuff. So it kind of took its own life in the UK. Strangely, bizarrely, it had its own little kind of thing, which has now become part of the bigger lexicon. Yeah, and obviously, if you read my Comics of the Week's things at the moment, the Image and Skybound have just relaunched the Image line, amalgamating it with the kind of more modern idea of it going with G.I. Joe, and that's been spectacular. That's kind of taken a lot of the Generation 1 stuff and kind of reimagining that, and that's been pretty good. And I've enjoyed quite a few of the Transformers games as well. The Atari Transformers game that was on PlayStation 2, I think, is great.
Rise.
Well, this was the very first. This was one of the very first ones, which was a release to Atari, I think, was Transformers, which was great. That was a really good game.
Yeah.
So I kind of not the target audience, but you know, it was. I quite liked it.
Well, it was the first. I think it was the first ever franchise that was just purely a cynical kind of capitalism cash-in. It was basically we have these toys. We want them to sell really well over here because it's something new, unique. It changes from a car, or it changes from a tank, or it changes from a plane into a robot.
Don't mention the hand.
And how are we going to flog it? How are we going to make it big? How are we going to do it? Let's sell toys. Let's make a cartoon. Which perfect thing is selling toys off the back of this cartoon. So if we can get this cartoon on as a kid's show, it's a 30-minute advert every single week where we release an episode. And I think that's where it came from. And it was very cynical.
I hope it was just cynical enough that they went, you know, in 2 years, all these kids we've made fall in love with Optimus Prime. We're going to get them.
Well, this is what I was just coming on to, because the movie is one of my earliest big memories as a child, because I had it on VHS. My mum taped over with Coronation Street. I've still not forgiven you for that. But it was a tape I played to death, and I went to watch it in the cinema, and I was heartbroken when Optimus Prime dies in Transformers the movie.
Spoilers.
It is one of the, if you've not seen it by now, you know we're going to get on. But it was gut wrenching, and it was because the execs just basically went, "Yeah, these toys are starting to get us a bit stale now. We've sold enough of them.
We need to refresh the range.
We need to refresh the line. So what we're going to do is have Rodimus Prime, and we'll get him voiced by Judd Nelson because all the kids love Judd Nelson." But it was that kind of thing of execs meddling to make decisions about things.
Where have we heard that before?
Where did that come from? But it was this whole thing of everybody knows it's a very cynical cash-in, and we're just creating a cartoon, because they were two completely different toy ranges with the Autobots and the Decepticons, and the only reason they became together into the Transformers toy line was because of the cartoon. But I still love it. It's still great to this day. It's still got one of the better themes of the 80s. I think we can all still hum it in our head. That little sound of the face spinning around between scenes, everybody still remembers that. I think you could probably show a kid a picture of Optimus Prime nowadays, and most children know who it is, just because the shape is iconic.
Yeah, someone who hasn't really watched it or engaged with the franchise at all, I recognise Optimus Prime.
Yeah,
it's like you said, it's iconic regardless.
Yeah, and we've been through all the different iterations. So we've had all the Michael Bay series of Transformers, kind of brought it back, and then it was kind of like we've corrected ourselves with Bumblebee. And then they just gave up again. It was like, yeah, we'll put the Beast Wars in now. And it's like, but you just got it right with Bumblebee. Why did you go back and ruin it? But the new Transformers 1 movie looks really good, and I actually really like the trailer for that.
It does look like fun. And yeah, Chris Hemsworth playing Optimus.
But he's not Optimus. That's the thing. It's like they're before they became Optimus Prime and Megatron.
Well, if they end the movie with Peter Cullen taking over the voice, that'll be fine. They need to do that thing like they do with Darth Vader, and go, Peter, can you just record every word in the entirety of the universe so that we can just use your voice as Optimus Prime forever?
Yeah,
Because
Peter and Frank Welker, just lots of money now, just so they could preserve those two voices forever.
Sam, I mean, because I'm thinking me and Ryan are kind of not a billion miles apart in age. I'm considerably much older than Ryan, but I would have thought you two were a little bit, maybe the first generation of Transformers would have passed you by.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I mean, if it's 84, then yeah.
I was not the target audience in that I was 5 years away from being born.
Yeah, so I was 2 years, but still, the sentiment is the same.
But you would
But
have
that
maybe
said,
Beast Wars.
Beast Wars was a huge part of my childhood. I was exactly the right target age for that when that came out. I loved the cartoon. I think it was one of the earlier sort of uses of CGI as a full animation style for the whole
I think
thing.
it was
And
that
then-
and Reboot were pretty much the two big CGI series of the time.
Yeah, and you can sort of watch the cartoon back on YouTube, and the CGI looks very shoddy, as you would expect, but plot-wise and character-wise, it really holds up well. It's quite an exciting thing to watch.
Yeah,
And,
because like I said, I never watched Transformers, but I definitely remember Beast Wars being big. Obviously, I just didn't get into it at the time, but like I just remember seeing it everywhere.
yeah,
So
my brother and I had a lot of the toys as well. So yeah, you're saying Optimus Prime is iconic and everyone recognises him. For me, he's always going to be a gorilla.
But they did that in the last film.
They did, yeah.
of the Beast, yeah.
My slight disappointment with that was that they made it a Transformers film instead of just going all out. This is going to be a Beast Wars film, and like Rhinox and Cheetor didn't even.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what their voices sounded like.
But some of the best naming of all time, Optimus Prime. Drop the E, add an A and L on the end.
Oh yeah.
Good guy, we're done, guys. That was a very creative session to do that one. Amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got to admit, it works.
It works.
Yeah.
It's like, do not mess if it works.
So there is a special, I don't know if there's going to be enough time when we release this episode, but there is a special celebration going on Our Friends the Mockingbird. So they're showing a split screen of the pilot episode with a table read. They brought the original voice cast back to do a table read with the pilot episode being aired, plus then the next 3 episodes in the first series. And then they're showing a sneak peek of Transformers Earthspark, which is the current iteration on cartoon going on TV at the moment. So tickets still available at the time of recording. Worth a view if you never got into Transformers or want to get into Transformers, or you want to relive that Transformers 40s.
Yeah, I mean, it kicks off a massive thing.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the animation of the cartoon is a little bit lacking. It's quite simple, as I'd got tired of that kind of Filmations type stuff that I'd had in the 70s, where it was Star Trek and Tarzan and stuff, where it was literally like every time there was a scene, it was the same running or the same facial animations.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of an improvement. But I wasn't a massive fan of the animated show just because it was a little lacking.
I was the perfect age for it, so I'm always going to love it.
Yeah, I just wanted the robots.
Yeah.
that was my
Pretty
thing.
cool. Everybody just forgets the 45 minutes of turning little things to try and get them to transform.
At least those older ones are nothing compared to the newer ones, and I've still got a Unicron that I'm too scared to turn back in its form because I'm like, I can't remember how this goes back together, and it's like a Krypton factor to try and get it back.
Well, you could be even lazier now, and they're very expensive, but the new Roboson models, where you just ask it to transform and it does it all on its own.
Yeah, but do you want one?
Oh God!
Yeah.
Have you seen the new Megatron, which is a tank that transforms? And I'm like, spare £1,200
Yeah.
might be worth it.
It would be very much the sort of toy that you're just never allowed to play with. That's going on a shelf, and occasionally I'll let you transform it on your birthday or something.
But it's weird which ones they picked, because they've done Optimus Prime, Grimlock, which was the weird middle segue, and now Megatron. It's like you'd think they'd just pick Ultra Magnus or Starscream
I
next.
can't remember which of the original Transformers it was that used to be the SR1. No, the Blackbird. Was there a Blackbird? Was that a Skyfire,
Jetfire.
Something like that. There was one version that was.
Yeah.
It was basically because it was the X-Men jet, and I wanted that as well. Well, that's cool.
I'm laughing because I've still got Beast Wars in my head. So when you're saying the Blackbird one, I was thinking, I don't remember a Blackbird one.
Right, and the final series having its 40th anniversary as well is our lovely Boys in Green. It is the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, as they were in the UK.
Yeah, but back then they were your boys in black and white.
Yes, with red bandanas.
Were they? No, they didn't.
It was
they
before
didn't,
the red.
well,
Yeah, it was before
I
the
think
red.
it was all black and white, so I don't think nothing was in colour.
Yes. So do you want to go through a bit of history of the start of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Eastman and Laird?
Eastman and Laird, basically, it was just an underground, well, not underground comic, because it came through a company called Mirage, and they just started doing this kind of like comic book series. It wasn't. I didn't really pick it up until a bit later when they started doing like collected editions, because it was a bit tricky to get hold of in the UK.
Yeah.
Really, it wasn't kind of one of those big big publishers. So
It's very difficult to get it published because it had Ninja in the title.
Well,
Yeah.
this is the other thing that I wasn't a big fan of the cartoon series when it first came out, because it was just
the comics are really dark. If you
yeah,
go
the
back
comics,
and read
the comics are very much kind of like adult, kind of like, you know, that kind of underground comics thing. So it was quite dark, quite violent, quite graphic. So it was. I really enjoyed that kind of beginning storylines that they did, which were quite excellent. And I like the scratchy art style as well.
Yeah.
So it was really kind of blocky and cartoony and kind of really nice. So the cartoon versions were just like, what the heck are these guys looking like? This looks like nothing like it should.
Because it was kind of a joke that it's the same origin as Daredevil in the comics.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the same accident that creates Daredevil.
Gets hit by a barrel of ooze,
Yeah.
glowing ooze and stuff like that, which is kind of funny. But again, like you said, they hadn't got the colour coding of the various characters and stuff, and they hadn't got the names, initials on their belts. So it was kind of like, it was basically just by the weapons that you knew who was who. But yeah, when the cartoon series came along, particularly in the UK,
Teenage Mutant, overdubbed this bit, Turtles.
yeah, that was a kind of like, it was okay. I didn't have much love for the cartoon series, to be honest.
Like I said, it was very fun, like going through all this when I made my censorship video and seeing, like, going back and looking up that title sequence and just seeing how bad the editing was in the UK version, because you could tell it was a rush hour job done at the 11th hour of just like, oh, the BBFC's told us to change this. It's coming out tomorrow, so you need to edit this. And you just hear like I think Splinter taught them to be like fighting, just like, because they'd had to cover Ninja, so they just took fighting from somewhere and just pasted it over.
Again, it's surprising how it took off. I think it was, I don't know if it was coming off the back of things like Transformers and He-Man or all the rest of it, and then this.
You had so many other spin-offs off the back of it. It's like Biker Mice from Mars, Samurai Pizza Cats. All these kind of spin-off shows wouldn't have existed without Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Street Sharks.
Street Sharks, yeah.
But I'm just surprised at how it's now 40 years later and the franchise is going from strength to strength, because IDW have just wrapped up their 150 issue run
Last
of
Ronin.
their main title. They've done the Last Ronin. They did the Last Ronin a few years back. They've just started the Last Ronin 2, which is kind of the kind of old man Logan for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
And then New Generation as well.
Towards the end of June, I think, they're starting a new run with Jason Aaron as the main writer, but they've got a lot of really interesting artists doing that. So they're doing an issue by issue, so they're reintroducing all the Turtles. So it's kind of I don't know whether it's a reboot of the IDW universe and stuff, but there's a wealth of comics, because they've bounced around publishers over the past 40 years as well. So there's been ones everywhere.
Interesting to see how many iterations they've gone through over the years as well. I mean, it's been one of those where every 3 to 4 to 5 years seems to be a new cartoon comes out for a different audience, different designs. Still the same core of Donatello, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, and Splinter, and April O'Neil, and Shredder. But they seem to refresh it so well, and it's every time they seem to capture a new audience, and it seems to be, as you said, going from strength to strength. I mean, if you think about, we had the Rubber Suit films in the early 90s.
Of which the first is still a standout Turtles film for me. That Jim Henson costume work, and just the fact that it actually did far as comic adaptations go, that is one of the best
Yeah.
comic adaptations that I've ever seen in terms of the tone and the way. And they mixed in a little bit at the kind of the more...
The second one's still pretty good. We won't talk too much about the third one.
Yeah, it's diminishing returns from that.
Yeah.
But then I think it was the TMNT
Yes.
CGI movie that was out pretty early 2000s.
Got to be about
possibly.
2016, yeah, I think.
I really like that. That was a really nice reboot as well. I wasn't a great fan of the
Bayformers.
yeah. There was something about those characters that just didn't quite work.
I'm pretty sure that like that TMNT CGI movie as well, like actually used proper voice actors to play the turtles rather than get like celebrities in.
Yeah, I mean the kind of celebrity voices you had in there were people like Patrick Stewart and stuff. But the other good thing about the turtles, which for me is one of the best things, is because it extended the idea of I like 4-people arcade games. So like Gauntlet or the X-Men or the Simpsons, you also had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4-player side-scrolling beat-em-up game, which is
one of
superb.
which came out fairly recently.
Yeah, and they've
Shredder's Revenge, which was
they're
incredible.
still fantastically good to play as well to this day. I mean, yeah, I think film-wise, so we had the original trilogy, 90, 91, 93, which was Turtle Mania in the UK and across the world.
Which one had the Vanilla Ice theme?
TMNT 2 had the Vanilla Ice theme.
Okay.
Turtle Power in TMNT 1 is a banger still, is a great song.
Yeah, because TMNT was 2007.
2007? Wow.
And then 2014 was when the Bayformers movie started.
It says a lot that like the second Turtles movie had Vanilla Ice doing its theme, and the arcade game made on a budget in 2022 gets Mike Patton to do its theme.
But then we've also had Mutant Mayhem, which is Seth Rogen's reinterpretation of the Turtles. And again, that was really popular. It's really gone down.
Yeah,
well.
we're about to get a TV series based on that. So Nickelodeon, I think, is the kind of the TV arm. So you had like Rise of the TNA, Rise of the... Why do they make it so difficult to say? Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah. We've had a couple of other Nickelodeon series. Some I think were more traditionally animated. Some have been kind of like a mix of CGI and stuff, which are really good.
I can confirm that it is Paramount that owns TMNT because they're the ones who took down my censorship video.
But
is Nickelodeon just a kind of subsidiary of the parent?
Exactly.
So. It's quite. There was even an anime adaptation. There's a 2-episode OVA which you can find if you look on the internet.
It does not surprise me weirdly enough. It feels very anime as a concept anyway.
But
so.
it's completely non-TMNT. They are superheroes. They have like costumes, mechs, superpowers, everything. It's worth a watch. Just because you're watching TMNT and you go, this isn't TMNT. It's just basically took 4 turtles and made them into.
So it's effectively like some Japanese guys who can't speak any English just saw the design of the turtles and went, all right, let's do something with it.
Pretty much. It's really fun to watch. But wrap up the segment. Also at the Mockingbird with our friends and the lovely Stacey Taylor, who has appeared on many episodes of Geeky Brummie. She was our first Geek of the Week. We are doing a special screening of season 1 of the 1987 cartoon. Pizza break with a quiz and some fantastically terrible prizes, which you will enjoy. And then we also...
Is any of it ooze?
It's not ooze. That hasn't aged well, unfortunately. But there are some actual age era appropriate prizes you can possibly win. And then, we are screening the 1990 TMNT movie as well.
She's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, one of the best, as you said, one of the best comic book adaptations of all time. Yeah. But yes, so it's 3 franchises hitting their anniversaries this year.
Makes you feel old.
It's time for our regular roundup of our favourite geeky thing since our last recording. So I'm going to pick Sam to start off with.
Okay. So this is episode slightly late, but I only watched it last night, so I'm going with it. But one of my absolute favourite animated programmes has finished recently, which is Archer. It had its final season a few months ago now, but they just had one final hour-long episode to round it all off, which I finally got around to watching last night, and it's brilliant. It's I I love the show anyway. H. John Benjamin, I will happily listen to that man voicing anything. And his character is just ridiculously funny all the time. He's so sort of comfortably in that over the top, but childish, but still very competent and knows it kind of character. And and the finale was full of everything that you'd sort of want. It was Archer being very selfish, but also still sort of maturing a little bit. Lots of nice sort of callbacks to earlier series, and like returning characters. There's a guy called Rip Ripley, I think his full name was. Yes. Voiced by Patrick Warburton, who's also another guy that I hardly listen to voice anything. Yeah. And yeah, a few other characters that just haven't seen for a while popping up again.
Because I was a massive Archers fan up until the kind of Coma series, and that's when I lost it.
It's so there were a few series when he was in the coma where they went down into a different genre, and I think it was interesting seeing what they were trying to do, and in some ways I do think it worked quite well. It was taking those characters and putting them in a different setting that made it more original and sort of gave them an excuse to play around with different genres, but at the same time it just works so well as a spy series, and it was lacking something when you took it out of that context. But then once he recovered from the coma, he was back to being a spy, and they sort of came back with this wonderfully daft subplot of them trying to kind of reinvent their public image. So they had some like PR people just following them around, completely disrupting everything they were doing. So yeah, if you haven't seen Archer, it's all on Netflix. It's well worth watching. And if you have, and you haven't got out with the finale yet, it just rounds it all off very nicely, and thoroughly recommend it.
Because I was going to say the original voice cast, and I don't know how many of them probably stick around, but it was absolutely fantastic. Because you had Jessica Walters, who had just come off Arrested Development at the time, Chris Parnell, who pops up in the new Fallout TV series, Aisha Taylor, who was fantastic, Judy Greer, who's just wonderful in everything she ever does. Yep. So, Jeffrey Tambor pops up, which, again, Arrested Development link. Lucky Yates as Krieger is one of the greatest characters ever created.
And on that note as well, there's a recurring side character called Slater, who is voiced by and is just an animated version of Christian Slater. And he's sort of one of the main antagonists in the finale, so it's good to see him pop back up again as well.
But yeah, it's I'm going to say, for the original series, the first 4 series are some of the most golden animation I've ever seen. Yeah. And I still quote it to this day. It's like any loud sound. Wow, 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 wow.
Yeah.
Lana! M for Mancy. I don't know. I mean, Keith, I imagine you watched Archer back in the day?
I've watched a few. I'm massively behind though, because I just lost track of it, and I don't know why I haven't caught up with it. Yeah. But yeah, I haven't.
Yeah,
for a
I
couple
think
of
I'm
years,
kind of the same as Keith. I've watched a few of like the first few episodes of it and not got up with it, but it was good what I saw of it. So.
Yeah, it's very bingeable. So if you did get back into it,
for some reason I made sure I kept on watching some Venture Brothers instead. I don't know why, but that was just because it was that Johnny Quest riff.
Yeah,
that I
it was a very similar kind of style of animation.
Yeah. In my case, it was just like, obviously it spawned so many memes and seeing it around. Then I saw it was on Netflix and was like, oh, I might as well watch this and sort of watch the episodes. But because I'm bad at keeping up with TV shows, like I just didn't continue with it. So
see, this is how we get ants.
Yes.
my favourite ever, because I put it on DVD, the original series. My favourite ever bonus episode of anything of all time was when they take the Archer pilot and replace Archer with a velociraptor. They don't change anything else. It's just Archer as a velociraptor, and he spends the entire time just roaring all the way through it. It's one of the most genius bonus episodes ever. I heard you. I'm assuming there's probably clips on YouTube somewhere, but it's basically just Archosaurus, and it's just Velociraptor wandering
I
around.
like it.
But yeah, I'm sad it's kind of finished, but I'm glad it has actually got a finale and an ending.
Yeah,
some of these
same.
shows that just run on forever never seem to close off.
Yeah, and I think after Mallory passed away as well, it's it's kind of run its course, I think. And like you say, it's nice to close it off properly rather than drag it out.
Awesome. So Archer on Netflix. Lee, how about yourself?
So I've been playing quite a few games lately, some of which I can't talk about. But I think the game that's probably taken up like a lot of my time and a lot of my brain, just a lot of my brain in general, is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So which is the second part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. So this is basically like the rest of Disc 1 from after Remake, which did the entire, just the Midgar section of Final Fantasy VII. This does everything from Midgar up until the end of Disc 1. I assume I haven't finished it yet, but I have heard vaguely that is roughly where it stops, at a very infamous scene, and apparently something happens with it, but I don't know yet, and I very deliberately avoided reading any spoilers. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with that. It's really kind of interesting to see how they've taken a lot of the locations and setting, and events of the original Final Fantasy VII and just sort of built on everything's just been made bigger and more expansive in so many different ways. So bits that were like minor plot points are now expanded into entire arcs, and one area that was like a little sort of side village that you went to once and you fought the Turks there, and then you kind of like you leave and it was just like a sort of single screen with like some ruins, is now an entire region of the map with its own brand new storyline and all this sort of stuff. And it's honestly kind of impressive, like how much they've put into this.
Because they could have just done a really lazy remake of this, couldn't they? They could have just done here's new shiny graphics. Mm-hmm. The entire structure of the game we're not changing, and everybody would have been happy with that. Mm-hmm. Final Fantasy VII is one of the greatest games of all time, the original release, but it sounds like they've taken care with these.
So you've got like, I'm trying to think of some of the specific things. So like the Gold Saucer, for instance, from Final Fantasy VII, it's a big theme park area that you go to, and you kind of hang out with one of your party members will kind of hang out with you as you kind of go around the thing. But they've made it this massive area with like each area has now got its own like distinct mini game and story bit that happens at that point in the story. Like the goofy little haunted hotel that you stay at in the Gold Saucer is now like just has a lot more going on. So like they initially, obviously the original game being very sort of low poly, you had like, the idea was it was sort of like a bellhop hanging from the ceiling was who you spoke to, and it all looked very kind of cartoony in the original graphics. They've kind of kept it, but they've got, obviously now it looks a lot more realistic, and like they've sort of played up the cheesiness of this as a concept, and then you get to go into the room and see what's in the room, and there's so much like cheesy horror stuff inside the room. Like there's a little chest in the corner, and you can open the chest and these eyeballs pop out, and it's just very and like there's like just whole area, like I said, whole areas that are just now there's a whole sequence at the Costa del Sol where you've got to like find beachwear, which was not in the original, and it's just
have they kept the controversial cross-dressing cloud?
Oh, that was in Remake.
Was that in Remake?
That was in the Midgar section. So like that was another thing that they'd massively like built on, because they like obviously there's a lot of questionable stuff around that whole sequence of, wouldn't it be funny if we put Cloud in a dress? Whereas this time around they kind of played it up as like, what if Cloud was in drag, and we played it up for all the camp that's worth. And so like it was very good sort of shift in sensibilities while keeping the sort of core joke there, and a lot of the joke is less like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we put a man in a dress? It's more like, what if we put Cloud specifically in a dress with all his awkwardness and all his like attempts to be stoic, and like we've made him fabulous, and he's just sort of like, God, I hate this. So, but yeah, obviously that's in remake, but Rebirth, like I said, just like, and one thing as well I'm really pleased by, they made Kate Sith Scottish, but they got an actual Scottish actor to play him, because I realised while listening to his voice, I was like, there's a few things that he's saying that like, they'd only know this if they actually got a Scottish person in. So I looked him up, and yes, he's actually Scottish.
Good to hear. So, I think the only problem for me is the gap between these games is, I think they're saying it's going to be about 5 years before the next one now.
I mean, it's
the
been,
final disc, I believe.
It's been 4 years since the last one, so I could see them probably having a similar thing, especially if like a lot of the assets now exist.
Yeah.
From the previous one, so I can see them sort of speeding up the process with it. The next one would have to be like disc 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But obviously, I think what people tend to forget is that disc 3 is just the crater.
Yeah.
So I think just all the FMVs that surround the crater just were so big that they had to shove it onto a third disc. Otherwise, they probably could have done onto it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with that, and it's just like, you know, the sort of different coloured chocobos you get in each region, and the different ways that you obtain all the chocobos as well. And like, they've improved chocobo racing, so now it's just Mario Kart with chocobos. Nice. Like, even the music, I was like, this is just Mario Kart music. How are Square not getting in trouble with Nintendo?
So it's making me wonder, are they going to do Final Fantasy VIII after they finished Final Fantasy VII?
I don't think so.
Because it was such an emo game, that one. It was all kind of depressing and sad. And I know Final Fantasy VII has very dark and depressing and sad moments, but it's got kind of more of a comedy tone across the top.
There have been rumours about a Final Fantasy IX remake. I don't know how true they are, but
I mean, I actually quite liked it. I don't think it's a bad game.
Oh,
I
it's
think
great,
just very emo.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be touching that one though. So.
Yeah,
but yeah, having a lot of fun with that, and I've reached Nibelheim is where I'm at right now. So just about to meet Vincent Valentine, played by Matt Mercer himself.
of course.
Who,
Got to keep those paychecks coming in.
Who has been like a massive fanboy about playing that role. So.
Wanted to mention some slight segue off of Final Fantasy 16 because somebody got announced today for the next Galactus movie, which I found absolutely hilarious. Which is Ralph Ineson, who is Finchy from The Office.
Yes,
is now going to be playing a Yorkshire Galactus in space.
Okay, so obviously, you know, he was in Final Fantasy 16, as you said.
That's it. Yeah.
And honestly, like, casting him was genius. Because Sid is just such a brilliant character in Final Fantasy 16 the whole time. He's just Ralph Ineson. Like that's it.
I've just got this image of Galactus trying to throw a shoe over a pub in the middle of something.
But the thing that's great about it is, like, I think the thing that you can point to sort of see how he's going to play Galactus is just look up Sid using his like summon powers. In Final Fantasy 16, where he's Ramur, who's like the big lightning summon from the Final Fantasy series. So he's this massive like guy with a massive beard, and he's like surrounded in lightning, and he's huge. But then he speaks, and it's just Ralph Ineson's voice coming out of him.
Because it's just going to be weird for like Galactus to be from Yorkshire.
I think it's great casting. So I'm sure he's perfectly capable of doing an accent that isn't a Yorkshire accent, and but his voice is so kind of deep and gravelly.
And it has been established that space has a north.
Yes. But I'm just hoping they keep like the same level of kind of at the end of Eternals when the judge turns up. Can I remember his name? The big celestial turns up, and there's like everybody goes, whoa. I'm hoping they do something similar when Galactus turns up. He's not just going to be this like 70-foot tall bloke.
No, I think
Finchy, coming up in a suit with a tie.
No, I think they should have, like you said, have this bit sort of big grand entrance, and they just go,
all right, lads.
All right, you're all right.
Cup of tea. Oh, yeah, sorry. Final Fantasy
Yes.
VII
Rebirth.
Rebirth.
I'm very curious as to what they're going to call the third one, because they can't use reunion, which is supposed to be, like, it's obviously a big arc word within the story. They
Yeah.
can't use reunion because they slapped that onto the Crisis Core remaster that they did. So I'm like, I don't know what. So
somebody's there with a dictionary going,
yeah, my suggestion
Restart.
is you just take Metal Gear Rising and call it Revengeance, and then just.
Keith, how about yourself?
I'm going to continue my pattern of doing things that are just a bit off and not really what they should be, because we've already been talking about 40th anniversaries, and there's something about this particular year that I kind of seem to revisit every so often. So my one geek thing this week is going to be 1984, the entire year.
Oh, not the George Orwell.
Not the George Orwell movie or the book, but the entire year of 1984. Mostly because it was such a pivotal year for me as a person, and I think it formed a lot of my loves as time goes on, because it was a year that had a phenomenal range of films.
1984, Keith.
I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say for identity theft purposes.
1984 was a big year for me because I took my first steps in.
Yeah. Anyway, so musically, it was great. There was lots of great music out there. There was lots of great things happening with comics. Obviously, we talked about two of them already. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics started. The Marvel run of Transformers started. Alan Moore started writing on Swamp Thing.
You've got
Marvel
Marvel
Secret
UK
Wars.
Star Wars comics then?
Oh, they've been going for ages before then. And there was kind of like a lot of a proliferation of kind of like smaller independent comics started. We had things like Zot was going and all the rest of it. So there was a lot of interesting things going on in comics thing. But the big kind of one in terms of the kind of ongoing thing that I come back to all the time is all the films that came out in 1984, which are cast iron classics, in my opinion. One of which I mentioned to my partner last night while we were watching an episode of Top of the Pops, which she's never seen, which I've got to correct within like a few days.
Which has never seen Top of the Pops.
No, she's never seen. She's never seen this film, which is called Streets of Fire, which is
I thought it was gonna be a Streets of
rock and roll
Fire.
musical. You've never seen Streets of Fire? You must correct this.
Keith, Streets
straight
of
away.
Rage was 1991.
No, it's Streets of Fire. But I look back at all the films that kind of came out in that year: Terminator, Gremlins, Ghostbusters, Footloose, 1984 itself, Buckaroo Banzai, Top Secret. The list goes on.
June.
It's June, the original David Lynch version of June. So there's so many great things that I just kind of think, oh my God, 1984 was just a year of great thing after great thing that I kind of come back to. And
Caravan of Courage and Ewok Adventure.
well, yeah, we can talk about that. But it's just, if you're looking for films or cartoons or comics that just seem to have hooked into the kind of global consciousness and become cultural touchstones, 1984 just seems to have been that year that just kind of hit the sweet spot and has continued to reverberate throughout my life. And I've looked back at it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I kind of looked at some of these things and I'm kind of looking back. And now, 40 years, I'm thinking maybe they start to lose their shine. Well, actually, I'm going to thinking, well, you know, the Marvel have just republished Rom and Micronauts, but Micronauts, the new missions, started in 1984 as well, and people like Blue Devil have appeared for the first time in DC Comics and stuff.
So basically, like what 1999 would have probably been for us.
Yeah, Purple Rain. My daughter's looking to watch Purple Rain, Prince, because I mean, what a great album that Purple Rain is. Purple Rain, the movie. Whatever anyone else thinks, is a classic. It's great. Stop Making Sense with David Byrne and Talking Heads. There's just I don't know what it is. It just seemed to be this kind of cosmic, what do they call them? Conjunction of just comics and TV and film and books and all the rest of it. I just kind of like congealed into 1984 being this. I think when 1984 happened, there was the outline of the Watcher in the sky at the time, and it's one of those kind of like key moments that just kind of seemed to be a fixed point for me that I just kind of seem to kind of not escape and keep revisiting.
So I was trying to think like what what about games in 1984? And I'm looking it up, and basically nothing. So
I think that was just post the Atari crash.
yeah,
It? So-
which obviously mostly affected America.
The
but
problem will be is that probably the version of 1984 games that you've got would be what anything could. Something that people had written themselves out of the back pages of
Yeah.
Zap 64,
Exactly.
or was sold to you on a cassette in the local garage.
So we're kind of a Dizzy game. There was always a Dizzy game for everyone.
There'd have
been something, there'd have been some kind of Saber
look.
Wolf kind of knockoff or whatever it is, or there'd have been the Ghostbusters game on the Commodore 64.
Well, I'm just looking for the TV as well, and my God, some of the stuff. The Family Nest came out this year,
Yeah.
and then Threads. So a bit of a swerve there, but Threads
Well, there's that
is
kind of
still-
thing as well. We're right in the middle of the kind of like nuclear Armageddon scare.
There were, in fact, no Dizzy games in 1984
What?
because Dizzy started in 1987.
No.
Wow,
Wow.
That's kind of
I
late.
thought Dizzy was much earlier than that.
Yeah. Well, it might have been, but there'd have been like Spectrum games and Commodore
Yeah.
65. I remember kind of hanging out at friends' houses who had got Commodore 64s and playing terrible games.
Yeah.
There's probably a Nemesis the Warlock game or something. So weird 2000 AD games that came out on cassettes that were just
Yeah,
bizarre.
because I was thinking, did the NES release in the US in 1984? Nope, 1985.
Yeah, it's still a little bit earlier before we get into that kind of
Yep.
next console
Because it would have,
kind of thing.
because the Famicom would have been out,
Yeah,
but it
just
would
not
have
in
launched the
UK.
year before in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a lot of US TV was starting to leak over into the UK. Well, we had the Ringo Starr era of Thomas the Tank Engine,
Well, very important.
Well, there you go.
Airwolf V. So
Well, that was because of the 1984 Olympics. Because one of the networks put V, the series, and it was V, and then you had V, the final battle, which was hilarious. But I highly recommend you have a quick look on Wikipedia and see what film and music and stuff came out, and have a visit. The films particularly are
Turns out I
phenomenal.
was looking at the wrong page. Jet Set Willy came out in 1984.
There you go.
Highest grossing arcade game was Pole Position.
Oh,
Track and
classic.
Fields came out
Had
in
a
the
track
UK.
and comic
Field.
had a cartoon show, Pole Position.
It did.
I think it was one of the first video games that had a cartoon series off the back of
Probably.
it.
1984 just keeps giving. Keeps giving.
Yeah, and I believe it's like, although originally it launched in 82, but I think maybe worldwide release in 84. But yeah, like obviously that's one of the sort of classic racing games that sort of kicked off the whole genre. So
So yes, that's
good
my
year.
my One Geek Thing. One Geek Year. So how about you, Ryan? What's yours?
To have something physical for a change.
Oh.
So last week, Keith and I were at Worlds Apart Birmingham, and we were doing Free Comic Book Day, and it was Star Wars Day as well. But we had a little segment on a section of the shop which is just been refurbished and remodeled, and lots of stuff was there. Can you work out which area of the shop this was, Keith?
Yes, I know exactly what it is that you're going to be revealing.
So I purchased and assembled
Oh, you built it too.
I've assembled.
Oh, wow.
my first Gunpla, which stands for Gundam Plastic something. Where is it? It's Gundam Plastic Assembly, I think, which is Gundam kit. I'll pop them out. But basically, this was my evening for the last 2 hours. Last night for 2 hours was building this little chap. So if you've seen, you won't be able to see him on camera. If you've seen the original Gundam series,
See if I can get him a bit closer.
you can grab him if you want. Be careful. But yeah, so if you have the original Gundam series, this is Gundam RX 78-2 prototype close combat mobile suit, which is this Gundam here. So, so it's basically, you get like, it's a bit like an Airfix kit, if you remember those from your youth, where you get your plastic sprues, you get your little nippers, and then you assemble it away.
Nippers, I like that.
But however, the good thing was, all of it is now no glue, no screws, it's all clicked together assembly.
And it's in colour, so you haven't got to paint it.
Yes. So here's what's known as a high grade kit. So there are lots and lots of different grades. So there is SD, which is super deformed. There is EG, which is anti-grade. There is HG, which is high grade, which is this one. Then it goes up to real grade, master grade, and I think perfect grade is the ultimate set. So he is kind of like the entry is basically never assembled anything ever in my entire life. Just want something really simple to collect together. High grade is what they recommend you start off with because it's kind of a bit more intricate, a bit more parts. You get the instructions together, and then you get little things to put alongside it. But yeah,
Grab them by
So if depending on how many more of these you want to do, if you want to either ruin your life by buying more,
yes,
or like you want to avoid this place because you don't want to get into it. Akihabara in Tokyo
yes,
has like entire shops that are just these,
yes,
and like replacement parts and just all the various accessories for like things like where you would need to sort of assemble them with additional things.
There is a
like
massive modding scene.
Yeah.
You can get little lights, smoke effects.
Do you get the
for him.
little stand in his
You
box, or
don't
have
get
you
the
got to
stand,
buy
or
that?
you have to buy that separately. So this is.
So you can make him like jump and fly and stuff, can't
Yeah.
you?
So I'll pop them over to you, Keith.
Oh.
But yeah. So, but the assembly wise, it was really nice and just relaxing for a weird kind of thing of just chilling. I think this is a 1:144 scale.
Oh, the articulation's nice.
Yeah, it's one of the best models I've ever put together for articulation. I think this model's about 10 years old. It's one of the re-releases because there's multiple different versions. As you can imagine, being the most popular and the most recognisable Gundam, this one's got lots and lots of different models.
Did surprise me to see the original Bandai logo on the box until I saw that logo, which is, I was like, okay, that's what I expected. The Bandai Namco one.
But I just thought, as an activity, it's actually quite fun to do, and you get something really nice at the end of it. And there's lots of different weapons he comes with, lots of different articulation you can do. I think he's one of the few that you can do in the actual like Gundam arms raised posed. So you can make him look like the original series anime cover, and he's supposed to be closer to the anime style design than some of the more realistic ones. So it's supposed to be really clean lines.
Yeah, I mean, it is
simple.
I think it is very similar to the one that they had in Odaiba as well.
Yeah.
Which is obviously the big life-size Gundam that they've got in Japan.
You can actually buy a special kit for that one as well, which is slightly different, which has got all the kind of extra bits.
I know that they basically swap out that model every few years because somehow Japan has multiple full-size Gundams now.
And why wouldn't you? I think I've got some. I don't think they were these. They were they're rubber-based.
Yeah.
So they're a bit not quite hard plastic. But I've got a few of these Gundam like that. But I keep looking at these boxes and I'm like,
I thought for less than 15 quid,
yeah,
2 hours of enjoyment putting it together. And to be honest, I think it looks a lot better than some of the kind of Black Series Star Wars figures you can get, or just generic figures you can buy nowadays.
I think if I was going to go for one, I'd probably want to go for one that was
the 1/100
next size up.
Yeah, there's a 1/100 scale. I think the biggest scale is 1/48, which stands about
huge.
this tall. Which I keep looking at. I'm like, Viv will kill me if I start getting really into these. But I just thought, what entertainment can you get for less than 15 quid for 2 hours and still end up with something really nice and really tactile and really poseable afterwards?
And you could make an animation with him. You could
Yes.
Stop motion animation. That's your task for next.
Well, now
week.
I've got that. I've of course need to buy a couple of Zaku's for him to fight. So you can't just have one. This is the thing you can't. But it's kind of just a really nice, just brain focused activity.
It's
I know
very
Sam, you
mindful,
do
isn't it?
model kits as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've mentioned on the show before. I've got some Warhammer type stuff, and there is something very nice and mindful and relaxing about putting them together. I enjoy the painting as well, which is a similar sort of experience. But there is something nice about the assembly and sort of starting out with, like you say, a big sheet of sprue and just gradually creating it into something. But it sounds like this is A, quite a lot cheaper than Warhammer, and B, posable. Like if you want something you can sort of have more as a display piece, I think this probably works a bit better.
Yeah, I was thinking it's a lot cheaper than the Lego that I have quite an extensive collection of. So,
and it seems to be, I think it's 1,000 yen is the starting price in Japan, but it's usually about a tenner over here in the UK.
So about the same price.
Yeah, and it goes up to about, if you're looking at the perfect grade ultimate editions with all the lights and bells and whistles and smoke generation and all that kind of stuff, they're about 250 quid. So it's a really nice, easy entry point. I mean, for that one, I would say that was kind of, I managed to build it. The instructions were pretty clear.
It's good quality.
It's good quality and
Looks
it's really posable as well, which is really surprising. Because I thought it was going to be one of those, you clip it together and it's like stuck in that pose for eternity. But no, so that was my...
He's going to have a bit of problem getting through doors with his gun round the
Well,
back.
it unclips. So
Yeah,
you
you
can
take it
actually swap the hands out on it as well, so you can like have it holding the weapons, etc. It comes with lots of different
Yeah, I did
accessories.
see, wasn't there like another...
There is another gun in
another
here.
gun that was
So,
in there.
yeah,
So,
and the sword in the back, so that's why he's only got one of the things in the back, because you can have him with two swords, etc. It's pretty cool. It's good fun.
Don't get me started on them.
Got enough activities to get on with. But I think at AnimeCon they're going to have a lot of these anyway, as part of the Forbidden Planet store, so if it wets your whistle.
I mean, the only Bandai Namco figure I'm waiting for is the Ling Xiaoyu Nendoroid, but you know.
As I said, there's plenty of places you can get it from, but Worlds Apart Birmingham do have a really good selection if you wanted to get into. And I think Joel and Nick are very knowledgeable.
Yeah, it's probably a good place to start if you just want to get advice on where the best place to start your building is.
I said, hey, yeah. Hey, yeah. What's going on?
I said, hey, what's going on? It's GeekyGoingsOn.
It is GeekyGoingsOn. It's been multiple years since we added this feature, but we thought we'd bring it back and start telling you about what's going on in Birmingham and the local area. So to start us off, we will go with Sam.
From the 25th of June to the 31st of August, there is Hamilton is coming to Birmingham. Fantastic, huge production. I've seen it a couple of times in London. My mum is a huge fan and has seen it, I think, upwards of 20 times now. So this is the touring show. I can't remember where it's been already, but it's, as I say, coming to Birmingham in June. It's basically the story of Alexander Hamilton, who was one of the founding fathers of America. And the first act is sort of telling the story of the birth of America as an independent country. It's all about the War of Independence. And then the second act is about them sort of establishing the government of America, and running throughout all of it is Hamilton's personal life, his rivalry with Aaron Burr and with Thomas Jefferson. But Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote all the music to it, has set it all to this incredibly complex, sort of lyrically athletic hip-hop and rap soundtrack, which normally wouldn't be my sort of thing, but I love all the songs in Hamilton. I was doing a couple of them at a karaoke thing the other week. It's the soundtrack is amazing. The production is incredible, and definitely recommend it. I'm going to see it myself. I've got tickets.
Yeah, it's on a good run as well for about 10 weeks, so plenty of opportunity to get over and watch it.
Yeah, and we got our tickets relatively late, and there were still not many cheap ones, but there was still plenty of tickets available. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Lee, how about yourself?
So we have, at the Mac, we have the Real Emil Clue. So this is the movie that is based on Cluedo, famous board game, which I didn't know this, but the creator is from Birmingham. And what I've noticed about this is that it's slightly missed the anniversary of the board game. It's 80 years, almost 80 years, but it just 81 years is what it is. But it's almost like 40 years since the film came out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sort of sitting between the two anniversaries. And obviously, you know, if you're not aware of Cluedo somehow, obviously it was a board game where, you know, detective board game, everyone has to figure out who done it, you know, figure out who did it, with what weapon and in what room. And obviously there was a movie made in 1985 starring Tim Curry, famously. And that is what the Mac are going to be showing, along with a special menu inspired by both the board game and the film adaptation.
Lots of mustard, I'm assuming.
Everything's just slathered in mustard. So that's what the Mac are doing. It's got like screening of the film, special menu, where every bite is a clue and every course is an adventure.
Oh, sounds interesting. I'm wondering which version of Clue they're going to show.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because like they famously made how many endings for it?
4 or 5?
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting which version they pick.
Yeah.
Cool. Keith?
Oh, and did I say what day that's on? That's on the 14th of June at the Mac.
Friday the 14th, yes.
Seems to be going backwards in time. On the 8th of June, which is a Saturday, so hopefully it'll be a bit like today and be nice and sunny, you'll have the opportunity to see Barbie, one of the best films of last year, which was denied the Oscars it deserved over some film about some guy with nuclear things about it, I don't know. But this much better film with Margot Robbie and who's winning over my affections, Ryan Gosling, as a plastic man, is going to be screened outdoors at the Birmingham Botanical Gardens in partnership with the Flat Pack Festival and Mockingbird Cinema. Mm-hmm. They're encouraging everybody to come along dressed in pink or to unleash your creativity with your own take on a blooming Barbie, whatever that means. I don't know. Flowers probably involved. Of course, there will be Prosecco, but there will also be cocktails, mocktails, delicious street food.
I believe it's the wonderful people from Smoke and Ash in
very nice.
Edgbaston. Really nice.
And all of this will be accompanied by a live DJ set. So the screening itself will start at 7:30, but because it's outdoors, don't forget to bring along your chairs, blankets, and other bits and pieces to give yourself a cosy, lovely movie watching experience. And as it's England, it might be best to pack an umbrella as well, just in case. But fingers crossed, it'll be as glorious as the movie itself.
Awesome, thank you. I've got 2 because I'm being greedy. So on the 28th of June at the O2 Institute Bloc party, I'll celebrate an anniversary as well. It is 20 years of their amazing album Silent Alarm.
20 years.
20 years since Silent Alarm came out, which is their seminal debut album of Kele Okereke and the team. We put that together. They're going to do a selection of their greatest hits. Sam and I were lucky to go to watch them at the O2 Academy last year with the new lineup. I think they got a new guitarist and new drummer at the time. Yeah. But it's one of the greatest albums of all time. It stands up to this day. There is nothing I cannot not say about that album. It's an amazing album, amazing soundtrack. Plus, I think Bloc Party kind of don't get the reputation they deserve to a certain extent. They had some of the biggest hits of that mid-2000s to late 2000s. And I think...
Yeah, between that and the second album as well.
Yeah, Weekend in the City. Yeah. There's like some fantastic tracks across those two. Really, really recommend them. And then finally, of course, coming up on Saturday the 15th and Sunday the 16th of June is AnimeConUK at the NEC. If you want to know what's going on and what happened, watch last issue episode. We had Pete Birkin from AnimeCon who explained it all, what's going on, what's the kind of feel of the show, but there's going to be guest panels, cosplay catwalk, silent disco, karaoke, cosplay after party, just celebrating anime, manga, K-pop, J-pop, and I think in partnership with Birmingham Anime Film Festival, which is us and the Mackie Bird, there'll be a screening room as well, so we'll be screening some films, previews, trailers, etc. So it's going to be really fun there. Plus, we'll be wandering around as Geeky Brummie at the same time. So
I wasn't informed of this.
we're doing 2 things. So we're wandering around. We're going to be doing a live podcast, and apparently we're going to be in a very interesting location for said live podcast recording.
The car park.
Not the car park. The Vikings are still in the car park, I think, from last time. But yeah,
they'll just be still hanging around after UK Games Expo.
Yeah, so that's coming up Saturday the 15th, Sunday the 16th of June at AnimeCon at the NEC. And also, there's going to be another outdoor screening at the Botanical Gardens coming up in August. More information coming out on soon, but it's a Ghibli treat as part of Bash 2024. So keep your ears peeled. Thanks for joining us on the Geeky Brummie issue for year 8, not year 3, like I said last time around. All these years of blending together, I've had far too many anniversaries. I think that's what it is. But Lee, where can we find you online?
You can find me on YouTube at Bob the Pet Ferret, where I recently released a video about the Tomb Raider expansions, and as I said earlier in the show, I will have a video up fairly soon about will there be another video game crash. You can also find me on Twitter at the Cheap Ferret, and I'm a freelance games writer, so you can find me on sites like Silicon Era, where by the time this goes out, I should have a review of Neptunia Game Maker up. So there we go.
Sam, how about yourself?
You can find me on Twitter, X, at DragonSam89.
It's Twitter.
Still Twitter. It's Twitter to us, got to have it.
And on Instagram at SDEdwards89. And you can also find me on the Geeky Brummie website every Thursday with the film roundup.
Awesome. Keith, how about yourself?
You can find me on Twixter, Instagram, Blue Sky. Just look for Hard Luck Hotel. It's generally going to be me. For some reason, the Twitter one still needs the underscore. I might sort that out and do that at some point. Particularly come and find me on Blue Sky, actually, because I need more reason to go on that rather than on Twixter. But yeah, and then every Wednesday on the Geeky Brummie website and the Twitter and our YouTube channel with the shorts. You can always see me shorts because they're the only shorts you're going to see me in this summer. And you can find that on the Geeky Brummie website. We've only got the comics of the week that week.
Awesome. And don't forget as well, Lee's Game Roundup on the website on Friday.
I always forget to mention that.
You can find us all.
Too much stuff.
Yes. You cannot find me on social media. I am an enigma. But you can find us all at Geeky Brummie on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We will get Blue Sky going at some point this soon. YouTube, of course, if you're watching this, or your podcasting streaming service of choice if you're listening to us. But we also do multiple shorts throughout the week, and as I said, plenty of content on the website. Lots more to come soon. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time round. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Bye.
Bye.
The Geeky Brummie podcast was presented by Ryan Parrish, with Lee Price, Sam Edwards and Keith Bloomfield. It's produced by Viv Parrish and is a Geeky Brummie production.